In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. Another off-season edition of the pod today. We have plenty to get to. The NBA playoffs is going on as we speak. We've actually got some close series, which is good. I wasn't sure we were going to get a ton of them, but we did. We got several games going to Game 6 with the chance to get a couple Game 7s, you know?
I think every series after last night, I may be wrong about this, I think this is true. I think every series except for the Thunder Spurs, who've already won, is going to at least 6 games.
Yeah.
Because none of the series ended last night, so all 3 of those are now going to Game 6. And then tonight we have 3 Game 6s on tap. So that's 6 of 8 first-round series going to at least 6 games.
Yeah, we were due for that because after the way that the regular season ended with so much of the tanking and it just being kind of a mess, I thought we were due to get some good playoff series. So I'm glad that is the case. We've got some big injuries in the playoffs already that have impacted some of these series. We'll talk about the playoffs a little bit later on in the pod. We'll open up with some draft stuff. We have some lottery reform news that came in, so plenty to get to today. But I think we're going to spend the most time on this, Chris, so let's start here. You have a piece in the Daily Memphian about the draft and the guard options that are on the board in the draft, particularly in the lottery. I thought you had some interesting notes in there. I think there's a lot that I agreed with. There's some I might have a little pushback on, so maybe we can have some good discussion here. And yeah, I overall think that you did a pretty good job of summarizing the way that that this might shake out in the lottery with the guards. So if I'll toss it to you here. What came to the front of mind as you wrote that piece, and how did you choose to put it together?
Well, just a little bit of background setup for to let people know sort of what I'm doing if they haven't read the story. So I'm going to do 3 sort of draft prospect preview pieces over the next week or so. One on guards, which is up now, and then next week I'll do one on wings and one on power forwards, bigs. And then after the combine, when we get the measurements, because that's really the last piece of information, at least that I'm going to get, I'll do some kind of board or ranking. So I have not ranked players to this point. We'll also know sort of where the Grizzlies draft pick is at that point. And so I just sort of went through the guard prospects I thought might be draftable for the Grizzlies. In this draft, the Grizzlies have picks somewhere in the top 10. We'll find out at 6 right now. And then they're at 16 and they're at 32. So that's a wide net. They're reaching different portions of the draft. Guys who I think are more deep second rounders are not really worth getting into. I mean, they could acquire a pick, but for right now. And so, I'm looking at players who I think conceivably draftable by the Grizzlies. And in the backcourt, it's interesting because, John Morant is still on the roster. Everyone thinks, and everyone who's been paying attention or is it all plugged in, thinks they're going to try to move him this summer. He is unlikely to be on the roster next season. Not a certainty yet, but unlikely. And so they are in a rebuild, but they don't have a centerpiece of their backcourt. They in theory have a centerpiece of their front court in Zach Edey. They have a centerpiece on the wing in Cedric Howard. They don't have the centerpiece in the backcourt going forward, but they do have lots of depth. They have lots of players. And so my read on the backcourt situation is, given their need for a centerpiece guard and given the way this draft is set up, which is top heavy with guards, there's a pretty good chance they're going to draft a guard in the top 10. If they jump up in the top 4, maybe they don't. Maybe they get a Boozer or a Wilson or a Debanza. But the odds are pretty good they're going to end up drafting a guard with their top 10 pick. And so to me, they're looking for quality in the draft at guard, potentially. And if they don't get a guard they think is going to be the centerpiece of their future backcourt, I suspect they'll be less likely to want to draft a guard later on because they already got too many role player guards on the roster already. So not to say they wouldn't draft a guard at 16 or at 32, but I think they're somewhat likely to do that, especially at 32, given that they already got a lot of guys like that on the roster.
Yeah, I think that really hits it pretty good. It's interesting though when you think about the players that are on the team now in the roster because Ty Jerome is a really good player. Like he's a really
Yeah,
good guard. He's just maybe on a different timeline, right?
right.
Than to be calling him centerpiece. But in terms of talent, like who if you said who's the best player on the team right now, if you want to go based on Zach Edey's 11 games or whatever he played last season, he was the best over that stretch. But Ty Jerome, even though he missed a ton of the season too, is right there with him. So it's interesting to say, they have a centerpiece in the front court, they have a centerpiece on the wing, but not at guard when you think about it in the context of just how well Ty Jerome played last season.
Yeah, yeah, but I would say, I mean, Jerome has never been, and maybe that'll change this coming season, and maybe it'll change for the Grizzlies. But he has never been a full-term starter in the
Yeah,
NBA. He's
that's right.
29 years old. He's never been a full-term starter. He was, one of the top 3 6 men, year before last, and was fantastic in a brief sample for the Grizzlies this season. I think it would be interesting to go into next season and let him be your starting point guard and see what that looks like, and maybe they'll get there depending on what the draft shakes out, depending on what the trade market for him shakes out. But I think even if they did that, to me, that doesn't preclude he could go into next season starting point guard. You could still take a guard in the top 10, especially if that guard was say Darren Peterson or Keaton Wagler, guys who can play off the ball a little bit more. Would it be a little wonkier to draft a Darius Acuff or a Kingston Fleming, then bring back Ty Jerome? Yeah, but like guess what? He played with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, so you can do that too. But I just think when you project it out, like, what's the Grizzlies team going to be 3 years from now? I don't think you can project much further than that in today's NBA. But like, what's it going to be 3 years from now? I don't know if it's Ty Jerome as the centerpiece of your backcourt at that point.
Okay, let's get into some of these guys. You took them one by one in the piece. Let's start at the top with Darren Peterson.
Yeah,
Your initial
I
thoughts on him.
yeah, I did separate them into sort of categories that are not ranked, right? And so like, I don't take them in the order they'll be drafted or that I would rank them because I separated them out a little bit positionally. But I do start with Darren Peterson.
Yeah, and Darren Peterson, like, look, if we're separating them, like, we do expect Darren Peterson's going to go before the rest of them. So
right. So my first group, to me, are not true lead guard point guards. They're guys that have a little bit more versatility. And at the top of that group, and at the top of all the guards, period, is Peterson. And when we talk about Peterson a lot, people have talked about Peterson's gotten a lot of attention. I think one of the things that if you're not like a hardcore draft person or a hardcore college basketball person and you're following it a little bit more removed, there's this sense that like Darren Peterson had a bad college season. And in a lot of ways he did. But as I point out, and as we've talked about before, he had a box plus minus of greater than 12. It was third best in the true freshman class behind Cameron Boozer and Caleb Wilson, based on the site I looked at. Some sites may have it slightly different. And the only other freshmen in the last 5 years who have topped that are Chet Holmgren, Cooper Flagg, and Evan Mobley, who are all like all-star level NBA players. And so guys who produce at that level as true college freshmen, major college freshmen, they don't always hit because sometimes injuries can disrupt you, like Zion Williamson, if you go back further on that list. But like they're almost always good. And even amid all the problems, even with the injury issues and he had the cramping issue we found out about early on that maybe he and his people were sort of spooked by, and maybe they were overly cautious about that. I think if I had a full body cramping episode, I might be a little spooked by that too. And then with, frankly, that Kansas team, like to me, wasn't very good in terms of the construction. Even with all of those issues, he still produced at that level, and you got the sense that you did not see the best version of him.
yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think everything you could want in a draft prospect in terms of an aesthetically pleasing basketball game, Darren Peterson has. Like he's got the smooth shot. I keep coming back to when Isolo made the comment in the middle of the season where he said we don't have a 3-level scorer on the team.
Right.
that's a true 3-level scorer, right? Darren
Yeah.
Peterson. He gets to the rim. He's got a mid-range game. He shoots a high volume of three-pointers. He connected on a good percentage, not a great percentage, but a good percentage in college. I mean, 3-level scorers are very hard to come by in the NBA, and it feels like he's destined to be a 3-level scorer. He also plays defense, and like all
Yeah.
of those are pluses. And
Right.
those players are rare. That's why he's going to go in the top 3, 4, and maybe number 1 overall. It is, to me, all the other stuff is concerning, but I think I'm choosing to trust some of the reporting that happened around it out of the Kansas program, which was that the body cramps was a real thing and that it wasn't just like a made up issue. And if you believe that and you think he's going to actually play in the NBA, this is clearly the top guard in the draft to
Do
me.
you have any, and this is a somewhat hard thing to talk about from a remove because we're not around it personally. We can only see like, what is mediated, on television and the internet. Do you have any concerns about sort of his demeanor or personality? Not in terms of being a negative thing generally, but in terms of being the best player on a team, being the leader of a team, that kind of aspect of it.
I mean, I think there might be some hesitation. Like
Yeah.
there's like stories that float about, you know, I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much because,
Well,
like I said, I'm
no,
removed from
I would
it.
just say he has come across at times just a little bit aloof, which to me is not necessarily a bad thing, but is that the like
So is
rally
Anthony
the
Edwards,
troops?
by the way. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I mean,
This is not something I ding him for personally. It's just a question I raise as the t- all NBA teams have a lot of work to do on all these players. They have even more work to do in Peterson in terms of looking at the medicals and investigating all of that and their interview with him and everything else. They've got a lot of work to do. But the talent level is there that like it's a number one, it's a first overall pick level talent.
yeah, no, I agree, and I think that he's definitely someone that you're going to have to do a lot of homework on if you're going to decide to make that pick. But if you're just going to watch the basketball played on the floor, he's a high usage, high offensive load player with pretty good playmaking skills, real defense with real size, and scores at all 3 levels. I mean, that's a guy that very often goes top 3 in the draft. So I don't think there's much more to add on him. It'll be interesting to see whoever does draft him what they will say about the homework that they've done on a
Yeah.
player like that, because there will be some questions as it relates to that. The Grizzlies are going to have to move up in the lottery in order to draft a player like that. I'll go to my second guard right now. Like I said, and like you've always said, these things are subject to change.
Okay,
But
but we're getting the tentative Drew Hill ranking
we're
subject to
getting a
change. That's
tentative guard ranking.
okay. There we go. Yeah.
So the second guard, and this is something. This is one thing that I texted you about last night. Like, I think I'm pretty high on Kingston Flemings. I like a lot of the numbers when you look at his game. And you texted me last night, not to spoil your point here, but like you're going to be interested to see how he measures, and I will be
Yeah.
too. But like the defensive numbers are better than all the other guards in this group when we go down with Keaton down the list: Keaton Wagler, Michael Brown, Darius Acuff, and Braden Burries is probably right there defensively with Kingston Flemings. Different types of players. He also has some of the best, playmaking numbers of any player, in this group as well. And like those are two things, and he's got speed, the defensive stats are, like I said, encouraging. The speed is encouraging. The playmaking is good. He didn't shoot a high volume of threes the way that some of these other guys did. And so maybe if you think about the context of the Grizzlies and what these last few seasons have been like, and you probably wanted Job to develop as a 3-point shooter, and it just hasn't happened. And so, Like I have some hesitation on a player like that, but I do think he can shoot. I don't think he's as good of a shooter as Acuff or Wagler, but I like all the other stuff more. And so that sort of has, as I've sort of tried to, I don't know, put these guys in order, I've prioritized those things, and I'm pretty high on a player like that. What are your thoughts on Kingston Flemings?
Yeah, he's someone who started to drop for me a little bit during the college season as I got into it, and as I've got into it more in the last few weeks, as you know, in terms of the writing process, I found myself coming back around to him more. Um, Flemings versus Acuff, who we might get to next, is one of the calls I'm having the hardest time with in terms of synthesizing all these players and ranking them. Flemings versus Acuff is sort of a hard call for me. I with Flemings, in terms of a few things you threw in there, in terms of the size, I mean, I'm interested in the measurements for everybody, but he's near the top of the list for me because he just doesn't look 6'4" to me when I watch the games. So I'm interested, like I don't his a lot of players, a lot of the players I watch them, I'm like, yeah, he looks like he's that tall, and I don't feel that way with Fleming. So I sort of want a confirmation of that with him. And obviously I'm interested in the wingspan on all of these guys. I've seen differing reports on his wingspan. I've seen some +1 and I've seen some +4, and like that's a big difference, especially if he's going to be 6'4" or shorter. I think the wingspan's going to matter a lot. So I'm interested in that. With the shooting, the numbers were good. And the comparison I made in the column was, to me, his play style and his physical makeup, guys that's similar to or John Morant and De'Aaron Fox, and a little bit more De'Aaron Fox, because I don't think he has the. If you think about those players coming into the NBA, and they were both top 10 picks, both multiple time All Stars, right? Ja came into the NBA with more explosiveness vertically and just more creativity as a playmaker. I think Flemings doesn't have those things. I think he's a lot more like De'Aaron Fox in that he's got a speed, quickness based game. But the playmaking is a little bit more vanilla, and he's not an overpowering guy at the rim. But Fleming's shooting numbers coming out of college are better than Morant's or Fox's. And so if you add better shooting onto that kind of quickness based game, like, De'Aaron Fox has made 2 All-Star games without the shot. And if you take that and add a jump shot to it, like, that's a really, really, really good player. I believe in Flemings as a shooter more than I believe in those comps. I don't believe in him as a shooter as much as I believe in Darius Acuff or Keaton Wagler or some other guys in the draft. Not just because of the lower volume, but because I think a lot of his game is also based on the elevation he gets, and I wonder if he gets less of that once he faces the wear and tear of an NBA season. And so one of my hesitations with Flemings relative to Acuff is that I think Acuff is a better all-around offensive player now, but I also think his offensive game is more likely to hold up against an NBA schedule over multiple seasons because of his body type, sturdier, and it's not as dependent on quickness and athleticism. And I wonder about that with Flemings.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. Part of what I texted last night, and the size is different. The size is going to be key because it's a step up in offensive talent, clearly, when you go to the NBA out of college. But he had of this group of guards, the best defensive box plus minus, the best defensive RAPM, highest steal percentage, highest block percentage, in addition to the highest assist percentage, the best assist to turnover ratio. And then they do a box creation stat on Data Baller in which Acuff was the only player better than Flemings in that statistic.
Wait. I'm sorry. Which stat were you citing just then?
Box creation. It's like it's a creation stat, and then they do the BPM plus, which is just like the box plus minus, which is the stat we keep referencing on this podcast over and over, and he's the highest in that as well. So I think the numbers are really good on Flemings. The all around numbers.
There's a similar stat that you can also find on that site that is, I think, probably a little bit more comprehensible to people. that I found pretty interesting to look at relative to the guards, and that's a percentage of rim assist. Like, what percentage of your assists are for like layups and dunks, right? Which is a higher value creation than like just kicking it to an
Yeah.
open 3-point shooter. And that's one where I can't remember what I think the Fleming's
It
number is good.
goes.
That's one where,
I got it in front of me. It's a cuff with
yeah,
5.7 rim assists per game.
the A cup number is huge on that.
Huge. Then it's Michael Brown Jr. at 4.4. Then it's Fleming's at 3.7. Then it's Wagler at 2.4 and Peterson
Yeah.
at 1.8. So yeah, the advantage A cuff in that for sure.
Yeah, but I also think, and I cited this in a couple of players I heard of that. I cited that stat a few times, but I also wondered about the team, the system situation. I think Arkansas was a system because there's a lot of up and down and a lot of athletes who could catch lobs like
Yeah.
Trayvon Brazile and Billy Richmond. That helps that. I think the Illinois system hurt that for Wagler because it's a slow down system with a lot of 3-point shooting. With Fleming's, it's sort of more neutral. And so I think that generally reflects pretty well on Fleming's. The playmaking stuff is good. I just don't think he's a creative passer, at the super elite level. But I think he's a real point guard, a real playmaker, and with the speed and the defense, I think he's gonna. Even though the numbers are good, I think there will be limitations to his defensive versatility because of his size. I
Yeah.
think I don't think you'll be able to switch him onto as many different kinds of players as say a Braden Burries is going to be able to switch onto, or even a Wagler if he adds strength. But I think he's going to be a disruptive defender. Like De'Aaron Fox is a guy who's like led the NBA in steals before, so it's another similar sort of thing to that.
Yeah, they have, and obviously the build is different on Fleming's and a guy like Burries, who's more sturdy for sure.
Yeah,
They have Fleming's listed at 6'4".
right.
His wingspan is listed at 6'5".
Yeah, but
But
I've
we'll
seen
see
bigger.
what happens at the combine. The
Yeah,
pod is going to the combine, people. The pod is
right.
going to the combine. The pod is making a trip to the NBA combine in
I,
what, a little over a week. So
I'll bring a tape measure if I need to.
yeah, we'll get that measurement ourselves. But I'm
I,
high on Flemings. I like Flemings. Let's go to the next guy, and I think this is the guy you're the highest on, which is Wagler.
Yeah, I can't quit. I can't quit Keaton Wagler. I fell in love. I fell in basketball love the first time I watched him in the middle of the college season, and I've sort of been a sucker for him ever since. I do think that I don't think he is better right now today than Kingston Flemings and Darius Acuff. So I think to take him above those guys, you're betting on a projection. But I think the entire draft is betting on a projection. And so there's something about him with his combination of size. I think he's a legit 6'6". His shooting, which when you watch him play, a lot of these guys have good 3-point shooting numbers. He looks like a major NBA 3-point shooter more so because of the distance in which he's taking shots, the way he's getting them. It looks like NBA playoff. Oh my God, that guy just like did a step back and drained a 26-footer in a guy's face. And that guy just pulled up in transition from 30 and shot it like it was nothing. Like he shoots like that. So I think if he can add strength, I think his game has a chance to just absolutely take off. There is downside there, though. There is downside to him, maybe more so than an Acuff or a Fleming. So I think he's risky, but I just think there's a ceiling with him over multiple years that I think could be special. But there is risk there.
Yeah, I mean the 260th ranked high school player showing up on
Well,
campus. Well, but hold on, there can be pluses to that. That can be
no.
that.
No, I just want to make one brief interjection, and we'll get back to it. You are not one of the people who's guilty of this, but there are people out there who are guilty of this, and this is something I have. This is something that I believed for a while. This goes back to the Chris Wallace era because Chris Wallace loved the high school rankings. I do not care about the high school rankings. I think the high school rankings lead you astray more than they lead you in the right direction when you're talking about NBA stuff.
I think that's true, but I also think that there is something, and this applies to Phylon. There's something very real about year over year improvement.
Yeah, yeah,
and players that are getting better at the right
yeah,
time. And
yeah.
so if he wasn't like some star high school player and showed up at Illinois his freshman year and was all of a sudden a lot better, who's to say he's not going to continue to get a lot better?
No,
This is
that's
the
right.
Cedric Coward situation, right? a
Yep.
player that continued to get a lot better and better over the years. And so you want to draft players that are still improving and that are raising their ceiling year over year. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there can be
No,
some
no,
pluses
no,
there. There
no,
can also be some risk that maybe some of it's fugazi or fake, but I don't think it is. Like, he put
the,
together a full college season of it.
the Coward thing
So
is interesting because in the final media session when I asked Coward sort of about being a later draftee, and he sort of made the point of like, I wasn't treated like an NBA prospect, early on, and I didn't have the same access to resources and all of this, and I don't know what kind of access or resources Wagler had, but I just we've gotten to the point where a lot of these guys are involved in this like, you know, NBA high college track early on as teenagers, and they do get resources that maybe guys who aren't on that track don't get. And you wonder if that, where would he be physically if he had been on that track for 4 years or whatever.
we should go to Acuff here, but now you just gave us the perfect lead into Michael Brown Jr., who
Yeah.
was part of that. And he's interesting. And I've learned more about him from listening to other people talk about Michael Brown Jr. And he's a little bit older. He's 20 already. And
Hey, wait a minute. Did we go to Wagler because Wagler was the next guy on your list after Fleming's?
double checking my list. Yes, I knew
Okay.
he was. Yes.
Interesting. I'm a little surprised by that.
Why? Who did you think I'd have?
Why do you hate Darius Acuff now?
I don't hate Darius Acuff. He's next.
You,
He's seventh.
okay.
Why? You have
You-
Acuff?
well, no, you used to be the Acuff guy. You've
I'm
soured on
not. I
Acuff.
was never the Acuff guy.
Okay, I thought you were.
I like Acuff, but I was
Yeah.
never the Acuff guy. Um. Anyway, let's go to Michael Brown Jr. because he was on part of that high school, like
Yeah.
preparing for the NBA circuit, and like one of the things that comes up when you listen to like draft people that follow the draft year round talk about him was like when he was coming into high school, he played at the Nike Hoop Summit. He played with Boozer and Peterson and Debansa, and he might have been the MVP of that event. Like he was amazing against all those guys in a real basketball setting, playing, competitive hoops, and he hit a growth spurt right there at the end of his of high school, going into college, and like they thought his game was progressing in a way where he was, getting to the basket a little bit more, and that was part of what was driving the hype of him coming into this college season, potentially being a top 3 pick in the draft. And the college season obviously did not go the way that he wanted it to go. He had the back injury. There were some inconsistencies there. He also blew up for a few huge performances at Louisville. He's really tricky. He, like I said, he's not ahead of Acuff on my list, but we'll go to him first just because we had the lead into him. What your thoughts on Michael Brown?
I think he's a hard one. I mean, it's sort of like the junior version of the Peterson thing, where you're trying to separate like what people thought about him coming into college relative to the college season. Unlike Peterson, he actually wasn't that good overall in terms of his college production, right? It was kind of messy. Like he did not have the 12 BPM. I think he had like a 5 or 6 or something, right? He had the big individual games, but overall the shooting numbers weren't great. The turnover numbers were high. When you watched him play, and I did a little bit, I got to ask you as a guy from Louisville. I don't know if how closely you follow the team. I don't even know who coaches Louisville. Are they well coached?
Pat Kelsey. Yeah, they are. They are. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're now going to have the number 1 recruiting class going into next season.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it looked like they just gave him the ball when he could play and said, just go do whatever. And you had this like college LaMelo Ball thing where he's just like jacking shots from all over the place and throwing the ball everywhere. And it created a lot of highlights, but also created a lot of bad basketball.
So I believe Pat Kelsey, and I did not grow up a Louisville fan. I actually grew up cheering against Louisville.
No, I just said from Louisville.
Yeah,
Louisville
yeah,
fan, but from
yeah.
Louisville.
No, I don't want people to confuse that here in Memphis because I know there's not a lot of fans of that program. But did not grow up a Louisville fan. It's an up and down style with a lot of threes,
Yeah.
and so I kind of figured that he was going to get to play that role if he wanted to, and like I said, it worked out for them sometimes. Other times it was a little bit of a mess. He's the trickiest guard of this group to figure out for me because how much do you want to believe the stuff that you didn't watch? Like I
Yeah.
didn't watch the Nike Hoop Summit and the high school events, if I'm just being honest. And so you're betting on what he could have been or what you thought he might be, and will he be a lot better in a more structured role? I don't know. It's so to me he's difficult to figure out. I have him
He's
below the
got
rest of the group though.
yeah, no, and he might be he was considered the number one point guard in the class before the season started. He might be the toolsiest of the point guards. Like if you put Pearson in a different class of the point guards. Height wise, he's like the second tallest after Wagler. In terms of deep shooting, he and Wagler are sort of similar, but he's more of a high volume guy. But he has the finish above the rim explosiveness that Wagler does not have. He's probably a more creative passer than like Fleming's. And so if you're taking about all these different elements of what can make an elite offensive player at that position, like he has got the most elements. It's just it's been so wild. And then he had like a back issue, and like how much are you interested in a back issue already? Like it's a 19-year-old. This is something, it's just something for medicals they have to look at. He's one of the guys you take a look at. I just think there's a lot there. I just think he's not, to me, there's so much risk that I can't put him in the class with Wagler, Acuff, Flemings. And so my question with him is like, is he above like, Burry's Phylon, or is he in that group? I mean, that's more where I'm at with him.
He is I will say he fits a lot of people talk about basketball going to rim and threes, right?
Right.
There was a lot of rim and threes and not a lot of mid-range stuff from Michael
Right.
Brown. And in the NBA, I think with some of the rim protection that some of these teams are going to have versus college, you know, I would like for my lead guard to have some sort of floater mid-range game.
Yeah.
And I think that there's other players that, have a better floater mid-range game than Michael Brown Jr., although he did get to the rim more frequently than the rest of that group. So
Right.
even Burries. So the only one I think that was slightly higher than him was Phylon. So yeah, I've had a hard time trying to figure out where to put Michael Brown Jr., but he is definitely one of the more interesting guard prospects and could pop. He has the potential to show that, that was a little bit of a fluky freshman season, and the talent is where everybody thought it was coming into the season. All right, let's go to Acuff. We'll do a speed round on the rest of them, but let's do Acuff first. Obviously, I think he's got the best offensive numbers of all of these guards in college. The
Yeah.
best playmaking numbers by a lot. His pick and roll numbers are really, really strong, especially as a pick and roll creator, which we know is something that aligns well with Tomas Isolo's system. The defense is very bad, though. So where do
Yeah.
you fall on Darius Acuff?
So on offense, he was fantastic offensively for Arkansas. It's hard to poke holes in the offense. There are a couple I would not even a hole I would poke, just a couple questions I would raise about of how much you want to believe in the offense. One is that he's clearly a good shooter, but like 44% is like pretty high. 3-point shooting is subject to variance in small samples. In a college, even a full college season is by definition a small sample because you're talking about fewer than 40 games. So how good of a shooter is he? I think he's pretty good, but I'm not expecting him to come in and shoot 44% from three, like right off the bat in the NBA. And then in terms of the playmaking stuff, he is clearly a very good passer. He's a very good lob passer. Like you can see him hooking up with Zach Edey, like in a pick and roll and throwing the lob. And like you want to weaponize that aspect of Zach Edey. And Acuff seems like a guard who can do that. Like that should have a lot of appeal to the Grizzlies. I also, like I said earlier, I think the Arkansas system sort of helped. So I don't know how much his ability goosed that system and how much that system goosed his ability, right? Because he did have Billy Richmond and Trayvon Brazile running the floor with him in an up-tempo system, right? Like he had those weapons. But I think he's just a really good offensive player. He's a 3-level scorer. He's a pure shooter. He plays with composure. He's a good passer. Like I don't, nothing's guaranteed, but he seems like a pretty strong bet to be a very, very good offensive player in the NBA. The defense is bad, and I think it's going to stay bad. The question is how bad, right? I just think his body type, which I think will be good for durability, is probably not great for him defensively. And we'll see what the wingspan comes in, but I think it's probably good. I think it's listed as a +3 right now in what's been reported before the combine. Is he really 6'3"? Is he more 6'2"? I just think guys built like that aren't typically like great defensive players in the NBA. His strength will help in some matchups, but like you look at like your Jalen Brunson types and guys like that, I think it's going to be a negative. The question is whether I think in Arkansas, we've talked about this before, but in Arkansas, he played 35 minutes a game in an up-tempo system and had the ball all the time. So he had to put so much energy into offense. He probably needed to conserve energy on defense. Maybe that's not as much the case in the NBA. Obviously, defense can be partly about, getting experience too. And maybe you're in a team situation where you can hide it better. But I think there's going to be an element of hiding it, right? And so guys like that tend to be raise the floor, but put a cap on a ceiling of a team. I think you see that with Brunson and the Knicks. You can win 50 plus games in the regular season. You can be a competitive playoff team. Can you win a title when a bad defender is your guy, right? And there are two teams in the playoffs still playing right now that like had all-star caliber offensive small guards and traded them in the middle of the season. Partly for that reason, Trae Young with Atlanta and Darius Garland with Cleveland, right? And so to me, that's just a real question in terms of him and in terms of what kind of team you want to build. Because he does lock you into a certain kind of team in a way that like a Wagler or Burries or Peterson, those guys are a little bit more versatile in terms of different lineups.
I like the Brunson comparison. Obviously, this player that I'm going to throw out there is not as big of a liability on defense, but offensively, I think he compares a little to Jamal Murray. What do you think?
I can see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see if the level of off the dribble shot making that Murray sort of developed, especially on that title winning Nuggets team is like super, super elite. Is he going to be that? Maybe. It's
Maybe. I mean,
possible.
that was one of his strengths in college. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. As I've sort of watched some of the games and the highlights, I'm like, oh, this feels a little bit like Jamal Murray.
I think he actually has he might have a higher ceiling as a pure point guard than Murray. Murray's a guy who is primarily a shot maker, right? And he's played off of that Nikola Jokic playmaking. He hasn't had to be the setup guy because that's Jokic. I think, the combination of shooting and playmaking that Acuff can bring is like very, very high level stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Let's do a quick speed round on the rest of these, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Next guard, LeBaron Philon, who
Yeah,
played.
you're an Alabama fan. You're an Alabama fan, Alabama grad.
Yep.
So you probably watched him a lot more than I have.
I watched
like
him a lot.
him. I like him, but I just can't get all the way there with him. Part of it is just he's such a slightly built guy. And he's not a great at the rim. There's just something about him. He's really good. His shooting numbers, both from three and inside the arc, are really strong. I just can't. Something about him just tells me low level starter, high level backup, and maybe that's unfair.
Maybe that's I could see that being the case. I'll tell you two reasons you should like him. One is that, as we talked about before, the year over year improvement is there,
Yeah.
right? He clearly got a lot better from his freshman year to his sophomore year at Alabama. He managed a ton of Alabama's offensive load, and they were one of the best offensive teams in the country with him running the point. I think his playmaking was hurt by the fact that Alabama essentially had no front court whatsoever for most of the season. And if you go watch the games in which they had Charles Bediako when they signed the G League player to come in center, and he only played from like January the 24th, I think, until February the 7th. It was just like a handful of games, maybe 7 games or so. All of LeBaron Philon's passing numbers were much, much better when he had an actual front court player to play with him in a pick and roll situation. And so I think the playmaking is better than he showed at the college level from my eyeballs and watching the team all year long. He doesn't have the age advantage that some of these other guards have because he's a little bit older after a second college season. And I just have a hard time putting him above any of these other guard options because of that and because of the frame, right? Because he's not a big, strong player. I do think he's very crafty around the rim. I do think he has an NBA style offensive game to him. The defensive stuff is a concern, and it will be a concern at the NBA level. So there's the speed run on LeBaron Philon, and let's do Braden Burries. You go ahead.
Yeah, I like Burries a lot. I just don't know. Do I like him at pick 7, 8, 9 if the Grizzlies drop in the draft? That's what I don't know, right? Sometimes you talk about 16 game players, which means players who can be on the floor, like, deep into the playoffs. I think Burries is a 16 game player. The problem is he might be a 16 game player, has to be your fourth or fifth best player in those lineups. And I just don't know if you take that high. But I think he is so solid. He's good at everything and good in every way, but maybe not great at anything. And I just don't know. I think there are outcomes. I've talked about this before. There are outcomes where he becomes Chauncey Billups, but that's not likely, right? It's probably more likely, maybe he's a Derek White, which would be awesome, but maybe he's like Gary Harris or he's like, one of Jalen Suggs, one of these kind of guys, right? I just don't know if you could have faith in this is the centerpiece of our rebuild backcourt.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a few things with him. One, the size is good, the defense is good. He has the game to be an all-around player. Sometimes when you're not elite at one thing, you have some of those players tend to get lost in the shuffle when they make it to the NBA. I was a little scared by some of the player comps statistically that pull up when you go to Hoop Explorer and Data Baller, like Miles McBride, Terry Rozier, Aaron Harrison, like Jarrett Culver.
Yeah.
Some of it's a little scary because those were good college players, like very good, productive college players with good BPM that weren't really elite at one thing, and it didn't work out in the NBA. So I'm with you, and for that same reason, I have him lower than I think everyone except for Philon in the group because I don't know what he's going to be excellent at when he gets to the NBA next season.
Right.
Where is he going to make a difference in year one? I don't know, but he's still young. He's got a chance to improve. He's got the physical tools to be a good player in the NBA. He's well connected in NBA circles. I know he and Bryce James are like close friends at Arizona. So I don't know. He's harder for me to come around on. We'll do one more. Ibuka Okori, who you wrote about at Stanford. This is a Mike Miller client here, as well as Philon. Your thoughts on him? He's obviously one of the best at getting paint touches and getting to the rim of this.
Yeah, I think he is interesting because he's not a guy I saw play a full college game. I've seen him just on video, right, or on clip stuff. But he may be more of a quote unquote walking paint touch even than Fleming's. He's not as fast as Fleming's, I don't think, in the open floor, but in terms of like just quick burst off the dribble, get yourself into the paint past the defender. Like he's kind of electric. Like he moves in an interesting way.
Can I throw a player comp out?
Yeah.
Colin Sexton.
Yeah, there's some of that. I think the issue is, okay, what happens then, right? I think he could become a good playmaker. He's not that yet. He's not a great finisher. He draws fouls like crazy, but like you have to have the ball a lot. Is he going to have the ball a lot in the NBA? One of the problems with him is that I think he needs lots and lots of reps to develop his playmaking, to develop his shooting, because he's an on-ball slashing kind of player. He needs the ball. He's 19 years old. He's kind of raw. Like, what happens when he's in the NBA next season? The best thing was probably going to be send him to the G League and say play 30 minutes a night as a point guard in the G League and develop. Wouldn't he rather take a big NIL deal and do that in college? I think he's a guy who I don't think I would take him at 16. The Grizzlies pick at 16. And I don't think he would be there at 32 because if he because if he's going to fall to 32, he's probably just going to go back to college. So I don't know how realistic he is for the Grizzlies, but I think he is an upside that's higher than all these other guards we haven't talked about.
Let's talk some draft reform.
Oh, do we want to do a tankathon spin?
Oh yeah, let's go ahead and do our tankathon spin. I gotta pull it up here. Give me 1 second.
We only got 2 more weeks of this, and then like it'll be done.
Yeah, we're committed to the bit. Here we go. Okay. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, mine's not that exciting. The Jazz jump up to first. I don't like that. Um, they got too much talent already. They don't need to be jumping up. Plus, because that means they would get AJ DeBonsa, and they've been grooming him basically. So I don't love that. Then I got the Wizards dropping one to pick second. Brooklyn Nets staying with the third pick. The Kings jumping up to fourth, which means the Clippers get the Pacers pick at 5, and the Grizzlies stay put at 6.
We would take mine. I have Washington staying at number 1 overall. I have Memphis jumping 4 spots to the second overall pick. I have Utah third, Indiana fourth, Brooklyn fifth, Sacramento sixth, New Orleans going to Atlanta seventh, and the Mavs eighth. So we would take that for sure. If the Grizzlies drafted second overall, you'd have your pick of just about everybody. So yeah, that would be a good spin. One thing we didn't note when we talked about the players, and something that I did note in a column I think I wrote last week. I've had some other non-Grizzly stuff come up that I've been working on this week, so you've been carrying our draft coverage, Chris. But I did write about how if you go look at the Grizzlies draft history under Zach Kleiman, they don't follow these mock drafts very closely. That's very clear.
Yeah.
Like they have really come off the consensus, rankings and picked players that are all over the board over these last 5 years.
One point I'll make about that, though, I think that's probably it might end up being super relevant to the 16, and maybe they just will throw a curveball there. They haven't had high picks though.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had Moran at 2, and everyone was taking Moran at 2. I think there was some RJ Barrett talk. I think that by the time I got to the draft, everyone was taking Moran at 2. Then the next highest pick they've had was 9, and they
9,
did
10, and 11, right?
Right. Yeah, because Zaire Williams 10. So
and all 3 of those though were guys not projected in the lottery.
All 3 of those were guys that were taken higher than where they would have been, like 2 days before the draft or whatever.
So if they're picking 8th or 7th, I wouldn't be shocked if they pick somebody outside of that.
We're hoping they're not picking 8th though, right? And so there seems to be sort of a 2-tier consensus. And to your point, they may go off the consensus, but there does seem to be a 2-tier consensus of these 4 guys we've been talking about all year: Debanza, Boozer, Peterson, Wilson, in some format, some order. And then there's consensus that's sort of developed around Fleming's Acuff Wagler, right? And maybe Mikal Brown to some people. And so are they going to go outside that consensus? Like, that's what I mean, maybe they will, but I think that's somewhat less likely than when you get down outside the second tier of the consensus. That's when they sort of got off the board. Once you get sort of a little bit deeper than that, they just haven't had a pick within that range. So I don't know.
I mean, if they're picking 6th, I think you're probably going to get somebody in that consensus top 7.
Yeah.
If they're picking 7, I don't know. Surely there's one of those 7 players that they don't like,
Right. And maybe that's the guy who's left. And at that point,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, draft reform, or not draft reform, lottery reform. Your thoughts on the proposal? Why don't you give a recap of the proposal, if you can?
So they're calling
and tell us why you don't like it.
Yeah, they're calling it a 3-2-1 system. And one point to make: this has not been instituted. They keep having meetings and leaking stuff out of the meetings. It has not been voted on yet, so it could change again. Like, it's changed since the first leak to the second leak, and maybe it'll change before the final product. But the new leak after the meeting this week is what they're calling a 3-2-1 system, which is sort of how the odds are tiered. But the 3 is in the middle. And so they have the system where, think about 3 lottery balls versus 2 versus 1 and the odds that generate, right? And so The bottom three teams, the teams that finish with the worst record, second worst, third worst record, actually have the two balls, the 2 out of 3 odds. And then the rest of the teams that miss the play-in, so 4 through 10, have the 3 balls. And then the teams that make the play-in, except for the team that wins the 7-8 game, get the no, I'm sorry. And then let me back up. It's so complicated. So the bottom 3 teams get the 2 balls. And then the rest of the teams that miss the play-in, which is 4 through 10, get the 3 balls. And then the teams that make the bottom half of the play-in game, the 9-10 game, they also get 2 balls. And then the losing teams in the 2 7-8 games, those 2 teams get the 1 ball. And then the winning team in the 7-8 game, which becomes the 7th seed in the playoffs, get 0 balls. So that's how it works. It's 16 teams, and they're going to draw all 16 picks. But the bottom 3 teams are capped at 12. They can't pick worse than 12. There's other stuff too, but that's the basis of the system, which I find is still too complicated.
Yes.
So I can tell. So we can talk about what I like or don't like about it.
So you get essentially
that's the system.
You're getting punished for being in the bottom 3, and I think there's issues with this.
So let me ask you about that, because there are some people who like that. They're calling it the relegation zone, the lower odds for the bottom 3 teams. It's supposed to encourage teams to try to avoid the bottom. Do you like that or not like that?
What happens when a team trades its first round pick and it has nothing to play for? Then they might as well just tank to all the way to the bottom.
Well,
you're giving the team you traded with.
You don't get any. You don't get it. There's no penalty for you if you don't have the pick. There's also no advantage for you. So
right. So
I don't think teams would tank. My issue, I don't like the relegation zone thing, because I think the point of flattening the odds, and they didn't flatten them all the way, but the point of flattening the odds and expanding the lottery is to remove the incentive for tanking. And so, I think this will essentially do that in terms of the bottom end tanking, like the worst of the league tanking. Once you remove that incentive to tank, then the idea is that teams should be just whatever they're going to be. And guess what? Somebody's going to be the worst team in the league. Somebody has to be the worst team in the league. And so if teams are not tanking and they're just the worst team in the league, because that's natural, and they're the worst team without tanking, why an extra punishment for that, right? So I think the odds should be the same for 1, 2, 3 as they are for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I believe in flattening odds. I don't like that manipulation at that end, because I think it's unduly punitive to teams that are going to be honestly bad. So I don't like that.
The other issue is the play-in stuff.
That's me the bigger issue, right? They're still leaving, but it won't happen every year, right? If next year's a bad draft and people won't care as much or whatever. But if this system is in place with another good draft, you're going to find yourself in a 7-8 game and thinking to yourself, well, it's better to be the 7 than the 8. But if we're the 8, we're still in the playoffs and we get a lottery ball, right? We can double dip. And I don't know why you're leaving. I don't know why you're leaving the opening for teams to think that way. To me, it is not necessary. Or why you have this cliff between the last play-in spot and the other spot where you're like, we could be the 10 seed and get in the play-in, but we're probably not going to go anywhere. But if we're the 11, we get an extra lottery ball. This is why I believe in flattening it out completely. And so I don't like these extra incentives that are in place to encourage teams to manipulate things. I think what you're trying to do is get rid of the manipulation. What I do think is good is not only are you doing more flattening, and you're also expanding the number of picks drawn. And there's so much focus on chance to get the number 1 pick. But what's really driven the tanking at the bottom end, if you look at it this season especially, it's not teams hungry to get the number 1 pick. It's teams hungry to give themselves a better floor for their pick and better overall odds of jumping up into a top 4, top 5, top whatever. So when you're flattening the odds and drawing down to 12, 16, whatever picks, I think that eliminates a lot of that. So I think this will yield better outcomes in terms of competitive basketball, but I think it's more complicated than it needs to be. And it still leaves little incentives and little punishments that aren't necessary to me. But here's why this is happening. I want to point this because I've sort of rolled my eyes publicly about the Adam Silver, commissioner's office makes things too complicated. it's not just that. This is not Adam Silver deciding this is what we're doing, because it's a vote among the 30 teams, and a certain, I think it's 23 maybe. A certain number of teams has to vote to approve a system, and that's why you have this problem. It's like legislation. It's like Congress or something. Like the sausage making is such that you have to get enough teams to vote for something. You end up having to do little compromises here and little compromises there, and well, this team doesn't want to go up to 22 because they don't want the 22nd team, the ninth best team in the league to get the number one pick, and they don't like that, so they won't vote for it if we do that. And this you start just cutting around and moving stuff around, and you create this sort of this committee logic of this overly complicated thing because you're trying to get it to where enough teams will vote for it, and that's why this happens.
How do you think this might impact the 2027 draft for the Grizzlies? It's interesting to think 1 year down the line that the Grizzlies own 3 first-round picks. They own a top 5 protected from the Lakers, and then the best of Minnesota, Cleveland, and Utah. So the chances are, if you're going to increase the number of teams that get to participate in the lottery, you're increasing the chances that the Grizzlies are going to have a second lottery pick, theoretically. And if you're going to flatten the odds, if you're thinking about teams like Minnesota, Cleveland, and Utah, if someone has a bad season, you probably wouldn't expect that they'd be the worst team in the league, but maybe their lottery odds are going to improve. So maybe there's more value to the Grizzlies 2027 draft.
No, it's interesting. It's sort of a setup. It's sort of a setup for the same disappointment we went through this season with the Phoenix pick. Right?
It really is, isn't it?
We're gonna spend all season saying, okay, they get the best of Utah, Cleveland, or Minnesota. So that's 3 different teams. That's 3 chances. Is one of those teams going to be outside the top 7 in their conference? And if just one of those teams is outside the top 7 in the conference, then that will get at least one lottery ball. That will get lottery odds. And so we'll spend all season watching that, and they'll all end up being like the 2 7 seeds and a 6. And we're sort of set up for that. The Lakers pick, they also have its top 6 protected, but that's another thing where if they're outside the top 7, they could be in the lottery, and that could easily be the 7th pick or whatever. And so,
top 6 or top 5?
I think it's top 6.
Oh, okay. I might be wrong on that.
So in theory, the Grizzlies could look up, a year from now and have the 1st, 2nd, and 7th pick in the draft, right? And watch it be a bad draft.
Yeah, so, no, that's possible. It's enough to maybe give me a little hesitation on, because we've seen the Grizzlies spend draft assets all the time to try to move up in drafts. Are you going to be spending 2027?
Well,
I don't know.
There's a real question. Mark Cuban has had some social media posts about this that are interesting. I haven't thought it through. But there's so much of this focus on how the lottery is going to work, but it becomes more complicated to think about how is that going to impact what teams do beyond that, right? How does it impact how you trade picks? What you're willing to trade, where your incentive to trade 4 picks. Is it, does it make it more valuable to just to hoard picks because they're darts now? What does it mean to the Grizzlies still have these future picks of teams they thought, might be bad? They have the Phoenix pick unprotected at 2030. Guess what? This system, even that they're going to vote on soon, is going to sunset in 2029. So it might not apply to that draft anyway, even if this gets approved. There's a lot of mess here. My general takeaway is I think this is a step in the right direction, but I think it's too complicated, and there's still too many bad elements to it. I think it will yield better outcomes. If your focus, and I think this should be the focus, if your focus is to eliminate the rampant taking and have just fewer teams just trying hard to lose, basically, I do think this will accomplish that, which I think is good for the quality of play.
Okay, here's a surprise exercise for you. So we have a bunch of playoff series, 6, as we mentioned, that are now 3-2. The Knicks lead the Hawks 3-2. The Timberwolves lead the Nuggets 3-2. The Cavs lead the Raptors 3-2. The Magic lead the Pistons 3-2. The Lakers lead the Rockets 3-2. And the Celtics lead the 76ers 3-2. Which team is most likely to come back from this 3-2 deficit and win in 7? Oh, you sprung it on you.
I thought you were going a totally different direction, and now I am not prepared to answer. So which of the 3? Give me just real quick the list again.
The Hawk. These are the teams that are down 3-2. Tell me the most likely to win the series. The Hawks.
Give me the teams. Right.
Hawks, Nuggets, Raptors, Pistons, Rockets, or Sixers.
It's not the Sixers. It's not the Hawks.
I
It's
don't think
not
it's the
the
Raptors.
it's not the Raptors. That was the next I was going to eliminate. So you got the Nuggets who have to win a game six in Minnesota to get back to a game seven at home. You have the Pistons who have to win a game six in Orlando to get back to a game seven at home. And then what was the third
The
team there? Oh, the
Rockets.
Rockets. I don't really. Durant's still not going to play in that game six.
He's become. I'll pause you. I'll let you think a little
Yeah,
bit more. He's becoming more of an empty player year
yeah.
over year. I mean,
I'm gonna
it's
I'm gonna go with the Nuggets because you have the Edwards. They
yep.
got to win in Minnesota, but they should have won in Minnesota in Game Four, which they didn't. But they have to win in Minnesota to get back to Game Seven. But Anthony Edwards is out. DiVincenzo's out. Um, they got Jokic. They got Murray. They've done this before. I'd like to say Detroit, but man, Cade Cunningham is just he's just doing this all by himself at this point. And it's really sad to me because Durant has had a terrible series. He's supposed to be the number two guy on that team. And like it's basically Cade Cunningham and some guys. And like could he win two more by himself? Pretty much, maybe. But I'm gonna go Nuggets. Is that your answer?
Yeah, I would say Nuggets, then Pistons, then Rockets.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously Denver has the pedigree here. They have the history. They know, you know, how to win a tight playoff series. They've been there before. Pistons have not. The Rockets with this group has not. The Lakers are really shaky right now, though. Like I could see the Rockets still winning the series even
Yeah.
without Durant. And just feels like you said, the Pistons are so reliant on Cade Cunningham that it just takes one okay performance and they're going to be finished. Do you have any thoughts just overall on what we've seen so far in the playoffs? I mean, I'm the Celtics Sixers series has been more competitive than I thought, which
Yeah.
has been a surprise. I have very little interest in the Raptors and the Cavs, to be honest with you.
Right.
Although,
Embiid coming back and having a huge game and a win in Boston was pretty interesting. And so if they
yeah,
can win in Philly and force a game seven, that's pretty interesting. Because I mean, Embiid Maxi, that's high end talent when they're both healthy.
and high variance, right? That
Yeah.
creates a high variance situation.
I
Um,
think the Nuggets and the Pistons have been the disappointing teams, and they both get a chance still to advance. But it's harder to have faith in the Nuggets beating the Spurs, which you didn't pick to begin with. You have the Spurs coming out of the West. I picked the Nuggets to beat the Spurs. It's hard to have faith in that, even if they get past Minnesota. And neither of us picked Detroit to go far in the playoffs, even as the one seed. But I really don't believe in that anymore. I think the Thunder, man. I hope this is not the case, but the Thunder might just roll. The Thunder might roll more than they did last year because they found themselves in two game sevens along the way to get that title last year. I don't know if that'll be the case this year.
that's why I picked the Spurs because I don't want that.
Yeah,
I just want to have fun basketball, especially when we get to like June, for the finals. I just want to have fun basketball. And I could think you can argue that even just the viewing experience of watching the Thunder isn't necessarily fun basketball all the time for the casual fan. So I'm hopeful for fun basketball, and for that reason, I kind of think I mean, you don't know if Edwards is going to play in a series against whoever
Spurs.
the
Yeah,
Spurs. So I kind of am hoping that Denver finds a way to come out of it because I would like to see a good. I think that'd be a great series between Denver and San Antonio. And then when you look at the East, Knicks and Celtics will have real storylines there, but it's not. I don't know. There's nothing about that Raptors and Cavs series that has really grabbed my attention,
Are you,
and
you're
I
not
don't.
you're not fired up for an Orlando Cleveland second round series?
That's what I'm saying. Like I
Yeah,
don't. I
yeah,
just. I can't get there. So
right.
I'm just kind of hoping the Nuggets find a way out of this because I don't think the Lakers or Rockets will be all that competitive with the Thunder either. Maybe I guess if Luca comes back and Reeves is back, then they can make it 5, 6 games. But like I don't see it. So
Since we're rooting for what we want to see, would you agree in terms of what is reasonable, what is reasonably possible? Would you agree that a Spurs Knicks series would be the most interesting, given the options?
yeah, I mean you could argue Boston and Spurs would be interesting because of the style contrast between those two
Right.
teams. I think Spurs and Knicks would be most interesting in the sense that the Knicks would have MSG
This is
in
what
the
I'm saying.
final setting, and that would
Right.
be banana land. Like it would be
Yeah.
so fun to watch how
Wimby in the
awesome and
guard.
crazy the Garden gets. I would
Wimby
love
in the
that.
gar- Wimby in the Garden in his first NBA Finals. That's some real basketball history kind of
I
stuff.
think they played on Christmas Day. Did they play on Christmas Day?
Well, maybe, but I'm talking about in the NBA Finals.
Well,
Wimby's first
yeah.
NBA Finals going in the Garden. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. No, that would be pretty fun. I think Boston would be fun too, though. If you got Boston and San Antonio, my fear is that OKC is just going to lay wreckage here and it's going to be not so fun to watch. Are you bothered by the whole, like, I don't love watching the Thunder. Do you get enjoyment out of watching the Thunder?
I mean, I admire not
It's an
as much as
interesting conversation.
not as much as other teams, right? They're not my favorite. The Spurs and the Nuggets are more interesting to me than I mean, I admire the defense and like just when they can really get revved up and pick people apart. But I'm not. For all kinds of reasons, I have a hard time, developing any kind of rooting interest in Oklahoma City Thunder. That's for sure.
Well, I was alluding to the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander stuff because I will say this about the Shea stuff.
I
It
don't love
gets
watching.
over.
I don't love watching free throws. Period. So yeah.
Well, there's that, but also it's just like I do think that there's other players that play the same way as Shea, like Luca plays a lot like Shea,
Right.
and we are maybe hypersensitive to the Shea flopping stuff, and it just gets blown up all over the internet every time that it happens, and he's not the only one that plays that way. But I don't.
James Harden. James Harden walked so they could both
Yeah,
run.
yeah, no, that's right. Trey Young's another player like that too. But it's that contrasted with how physical they play on defense. Just I don't. It's not a fun viewing. Like I don't. It's like you're watching somebody hit the deck every time down the floor on offense, and then it's Taekwondo on defense, and it's just not appealing basketball to me. But I could see why if you were a Thunder fan, you would love it, right? But I'm just as a casual basketball watcher, not my favorite team in the league to watch, and so if they're back in the finals again, it's just going to be a whole conversation all about the free throws, and that's just exhausting.
No, man. I want to see Knicks Spurs or Knicks Nuggets. Give me Wimby in the Garden, or give me Brunson and Murray exchanging clutch shots. The different kinds of super skill level of Jokic and Towns going against each other. That's what I want. I want the Knicks against either the Nuggets or the Spurs.
I will say, if we get Knicks and Celtics, the atmosphere is going to be awesome. So that will be a fun second round series. I'm hoping for that, and I'm hoping for Nuggets and Spurs too. Those would be two really fun second round series. Okay, there's more to life than basketball. Really quick, what'd you do this week, Chris? And I think we took last week off, so you got plenty to catch up on here.
We've been nesting, man. We've been doing major house stuff. We're doing major landscaping in the front yard. I built and have filled new additional garden beds in the back because I'm a farmer now. I've been doing lots of that. My son and I went to see Michael, which is terrible. My wife and I went to see Mother Mary, which I think is very good, but odd. I'm trying to talk my son into our neighborhood movie theater is showing Close Encounters of the Third Kind tonight, but it's a 9 p.m. start. And my son's like, I don't know, that's pretty late. I'm like, stop being lame. I don't care if it's a school night. Let's go see the 9 p.m. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So I'm gonna try to talk him into going to see that tonight.
We had the stomach bug wreck our house 2 weeks ago, which was awful. And now we have come out of it. We also have fixed our front yard, brand new sod, everything, just in time for MLG and W to come out and paint the front yard. Because now I've realized that they're going to rip it up. Our brand new sod that we just put down, they're going to come rip up, which is not cool. I did finally go see Project Hail Mary, the movie.
That took you a long time.
It took me a long time.
For a
I
guy
have
who
a
had been,
baby at my house. I can't take a
for,
baby. I got to get
for,
a babysitter to go see a movie.
for a guy who had been anticipating that movie for months, man,
I know.
you almost ran out of time.
It did. I will say I will say they did a very good job of like the book is very nerdy science and they dumbed it down like the perfect amount, I thought.
Right.
And I liked it. I thought it was good. So I enjoyed that. So there we go. There was our movie discussion. There's a show I started too on Apple TV. I think it's called Blackbird. Have you seen that? Are you familiar?
I've not seen that.
Anyway, yeah, started that. So that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week talking playoffs and Grizzlies. And like I said, 2 weeks from now, the pod is going to the lottery. So the pod will be there for the combine and the lottery. We'll let you know everything we learn. So make sure you check that out. Go read Chris's draft stuff over at the Daily Memphian. I should have a few stories coming out pretty soon, not Grizzlies related, but some more fun sports stuff from around the city for you to go check out. For Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.